This is the Good Growth Shared Prosperity Fund webinar, and we're going to be talking about community funding opportunities. So I'm going to kind of give an introduction, explain about the Good Growth Programme, and then going to hand over to my colleague Vanessa Luckwell to talk about the Community Capacity Fund, and then Noel about to talk about the Community Levelling Up Programme, and they'll talk through their respective programmes and the kind of specific technical details on making an application. We've also got other colleagues on the call who will assist with fielding questions in the chat. So given the number of people, we're only able to accept questions in the chat. If there's time at the end, we may take some questions, but effectively, if you do have a question, please do use the chat function and we'll try and answer those in real time. And if there's any we don't get through, we also plan to pull together a Q&A question and answer document that will also circulate at the end with the email and the webinar recording. So yeah, in terms of just housekeeping, there's approximately 400 people registered and on this call. So yeah, as explained, we'll try and field the questions as quickly as we can. We've got an hour scheduled for this call, so we'll do our best to keep to time and hopefully have time for questions at the end. And as always, we've got the Cornwall Isles of Scilly Good Growth website alongside the Community Capacity Fund and Community Levelling Up Programme websites, which are a great source of information, and all the underlying detail that myself and colleagues will be covering in the next hour can be found there. Colleagues will also put those links in the chat as well, so you can follow those as well while we speak. Can I have the next slide, please? So yeah, in terms of the agenda, as discussed, I'll talking about the Good Growth Programme and the Shared Prosperity Fund, so a high-level overview of what it's about. Then talk about this Year 4 funding allocation received from government, which has allowed us to open these opportunities today. Then I'll hand over to Vanessa to talk about Community Capacity Fund, then Noel to talk about the Community Levelling Up Programme. Then we'll summarise what support and grant opportunities are available, and then we'll take some questions as well as taking questions in the chat. Can I have the next slide, please? So yeah, the Good Growth Programme. So to date, Cornwall and Isles of Scilly's been awarded 137 million, and that was from 2022. And this has funded a wide range of projects under the 3 investment themes of supporting local business, community in place, and people and skills. And this has included activities such as business support, small grants ranging from 2,000 to 200,000 for businesses, community organisations, and various skill programmes and people support programmes. We're pleased to say that now that Year 4 has been confirmed, it means much of this will continue, including the small under £200,000 grant programmes, both for business, which are available through the Growth Hub, and then for community organisations, which are available through the 2 funding streams we're going to be talking about today. And again, just to reiterate, full details are available on the website and social media, so please also sign up for our newsletter, where as we've got new developments and announcements, we'll share them on that. Can I have the next slide, please? Underpinning the Good Growth Programme, there's the Good Growth Principles, and this is what we're looking to see in all the projects we fund and support. So we're looking for projects that are clean and green. So this is how they're going to help reductions in CO2 emissions, nature recovery, reuse principles. We're looking for projects within kind of that support business and economy principles. This includes community projects. So, you know, if you're going to employ people with your project, you're paying the real living wage and upskilling your workforce. And then we're also looking for equality, diversity and inclusion. So we're looking for projects. There's some examples: reducing gender pay gaps, increasing levels of functional numeracy, and maximising opportunities for all. And I think it's important to say that there's full detail of this on our Good Growth website, and that talks about the Good Growth principles and how you can embed those in your project. So the year 4 allocation from government is 47.3 million. Now that's allocated and split between continuation funding, so that's for some of our business support and some of our ongoing community and skills support provision. We also had a call for strategic business sectors, which is now closed. Ongoing for the business community, which does include social and community enterprises, is the Growth Hub business grants and business support. And then the 4th strand is the community grants, which we're going to go into more detail today on this webinar, and that's about those community projects which are making a difference for places and for the communities in Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly. I think the real challenge just around that 47.3 million is that we have to deliver it from the 1st of April 2025 through to the 31st of December 2025. So what we're looking at, and we know it's quite a challenge, but this has kind of come from central government, is that we need projects that will actually complete themselves by December 2025 financially, so that we can then draw the money down. And colleagues will talk more about what that means for their various schemes as they give their updates. So this is challenging, and it does mean that we need projects that are very much kind of ready to go and have got everything lined up. So hopefully, if you're on the call today, you've got projects that can deliver within this tight remit of timescales. Next slide, please. So yeah, this brings us on to the kind of support and what for community organisations and what we're going to talk about today. So going to talk about 2 funding opportunities. We've got the Community Capacity Fund, as said, colleague Vanessa will talk about that and the support that that can offer. And then Noel will talk about the Community Levelling Up programme and the support that they can offer. And I think it's kind of important to understand that similar to previous SPF community funding opportunities, you know, it's ongoing, but there are some similarities, but there's also some slight differences as well. So if you have engaged before, do look at the scheme details and rules, which our colleagues will go into, just to make sure that your project does fit within those. And we're still looking for kind of strategic projects that meet our investment plan and will deliver within our people, place and community kind of missions. And with that, I'm just going to now talk about handing over to Vanessa to talk about her Community Capacity Fund, please. Vanessa, I think you're on mute, by the way.
Certainly I am. Hello, thanks, James. Yeah, nice to see so many familiar names and organisations on this call. Some of you might see yourself in photographs coming up because we've got a few photos in these slides here. Just very briefly on our programme so far over 2023 and 24, we have given out just shy of £2 million worth of grants to community organisations, to 150 community projects. So in James's slide, he mentioned there being 143 projects under the Good Growth banner, but 2 of those projects are this one and the Levelling Up Fund. So as you can see, it's been spread very far and wide and across the whole of Cornwall and to a very wide range of community organisations. And that pie chart there sort of gives a bit of a flavour of the different types of organisations. Next slide, please. So for this year coming, we're very pleased to have this additional year because we can see that there's a very clear need. The community sector in Cornwall is vast. There are so many community organisations, and we've dealt with very, very many, and we can see that it's a good need. The box to the left with outputs and outcomes are the exact outputs and outcomes for our targets for the government for this funding, as well as numbers of organisations getting grants. So that's the actual language that is used for for government. For this year coming, we have just over £1 million, and that sounds like a lot of money, and it is a lot of money, but actually, given the scope with it, the amount of community organisations, it will probably get very easily given out, and we'll get a lot of applications, I think. Quick couple of photos in there. We have Redruth Rugby Club to the left, we've got Tregovnick at the top, and we've got Mitchell Village Hall down there on the right. Next slide, please. So the very basics, and we're getting lots of questions coming in. I can see that are asking for a lot more detail, and we'll try and cover those in the Q&A, or as James said later on. But the very basics are that we can fund grants of from 1,000 to a penny less than 25,000. We do not require any match funding for this particular fund, and it is aimed very specifically at local community organisations that are not for profit, particularly the smaller ones and those that have not had the extensive grant experience. So we're not really looking to fund your larger voluntary sector organisations. It's very much about these small community organisations that are in all of our communities. There is, you'll hear a little bit more from Nolwenn as well about community area partnerships, and some of you might know a bit about them. We'll put the link in the chat where you can find out more about community area partnerships. But they are essentially a way of Cornwall being carved up into 12 areas, and town and parish councils and Cornwall councillors, as well as voluntary sector organisations, meet regularly and have an action plan for those areas. And each of those 12 areas for the first 6 months of our fund will have an allocation, which is based on how many Cornwall councillors there are in that community area partnership area. The community area partnership has a funding panel, which is a small representative group, and as the applications come to us, they have a role in giving us a view. So it very much, so you can see why our fund is very much focused on local community organisations, because those people who live and work in the area are able to engage with us and talk to us about the applications coming forward. So we very much recommend you to talk to your Cornwall councillor and to your town and parish council to ensure that they have some awareness of your project, maybe. And we've got links to, we can put a link in the chat about how you find out who they are if you don't know. Obviously, town and parish councils are also eligible for, they can apply for these grants as well. And there is the option for us to cover projects that cover the wider areas than just a small area. And even Cornwall wide this time round. We weren't able to do that before, but we can this time for a limited number. But I would suggest talking to us first if you have something in mind that you think might be covering a larger area. Next slide, thank you. So what we can fund, for those of you who are familiar with our grant programme over the last year and a half, we can continue to fund activities that fall within project development activity. So that's essentially where a community organisation has a project or a project idea, and it's how activity where you can buy in services to progress that idea further along the line. So it might be a business plan, it might be an architect or a landscape architect plan, it could be a feasibility study, and it can be community consultation. So it might be a consultation about a specific project, it might be a consultation about a community, it might be about your whole village or even your town. And it also, additionally, this time round for these 12 months, we can also fund along the lines of a feasibility. We can also fund where a community has a project idea and they'd like to test it out. So they'd like to, they already have the idea and they think that it might be something that they'd like to be able to do, but they can pay a service provider to come in to test out that idea to see if it's viable, which would feed into a sort of feasibility. So that's new this year. As well as that, something that is also new is we can pay for small pieces of equipment. That can be, but we do very clearly need to be able to see how that will increase the number of community events. Because if we were to go back to the targets at the top, the government targets, it has to fit within our community, increasing community events or community activity. So it can't be a shopping list of things that you would like to, you've had on a list that things that you'd like to get, but you haven't been able to. It needs to be specific pieces of equipment that you can see will definitely increase activity, and we would need to know how that is. So what you're currently doing and what you think might happen if you were to buy that piece of equipment. And to prompt myself, I've got a picture of Camelford Bowling Club there, which is a project that we have funded. And a couple of us recently went to a village hall, and we were sort of talking about this new criteria, and we asked, and I think they're on the call, and we asked, you know, if you were thinking about a small capital item, what sort of things do you think would be helpful for you? And they had a couple of ideas which seemed to be a good fit. So as an example, one of their ideas was that they people were asking about short mat bowls, and they've seen short mat bowls operating in other village halls, and they currently don't do that. So from not doing it at all, they'd be able to add that. They could buy some equipment, add that to their program of activities, and that would increase community activity. They also had inquiries from organisations who'd like to hire their space, but they need audio visual equipment. So having a projector and some speakers, a sound system of some sort, would help them to increase their booking. So again, they would be able to very clearly show us how it increases community activity. And above that photo, we've also got community routes, very nice one at the top there with a couple of committee members. So that's another project that we have funded. Next slide, please. What we need, we don't need a lot. We are a simple program. You know, we've tried to make it as simple as possible, and we don't ask for a lot. We have a fairly simple application form. It is a revised application form from last time. If you have, so it's a Word document. It's on the web page that we'll put in the link. We can accept partial applications. So sometimes we have groups come to us and they say, well, we filled it in as best we can, but there are a couple of things we're not quite sure about. There are guidance that go with the application form, question for question. But if it is that you have bits that you're not quite sure about, then we can accept a half completed form. And then what we will do is we have a weekly meeting where our delivery officers are allocated. We know between us, we decide who's going to pick up which project. So an individual worker would then work with you to help you to complete it and make sure that it's a good fit. So we don't get your application if we don't like it. It goes in the bin. We would absolutely work with you to try and make it fit. And if it is that what you're asking for is something that is difficult, we will discuss it with you and see if there is some other way of doing it. And if all else fails and it absolutely doesn't work for us, then we will try and point you to another funder or another route. So there's a lot of support. We are only a small team, but the aim for this programme is to give as much support as possible, because we really are trying to focus on those small community organisations. We need a copy of your constitution. And that does need to show that it is a not-for-profit organisation, a charity, or a town and parish council. If you are a community interest company, we would ask you to contact us first, because community interest companies can vary in range enormously, all the way from very much like a charity model up to a business model. And we are looking to the more charity end. So we would want you to talk to us first, give us a call, send us an email, and we will work through that to see if it's a fit. We will need a copy of your recent bank statement or your accounts, very simple. And we need a quote. So we do need a quote for the works, or a link. It can just be a link to, if it's for small pieces of equipment, it can just be links to where you would aim to buy them. If your project relates to a specific site, a building or some land, a park or something, then we do need to understand whether you own it or whether you lease it, and we need to see some evidence of that. If it's a project where you're moving towards taking on a lease and you maybe want to do a feasibility study to see if it's something that you ought to do, then we would need just some evidence to show that there are discussions about that journey. So that could just be emails from the landowners to say, yes, we're in discussion and we're talking positively about this option. If you're planning to provide community consultation or deliver a pilot project, anything where you're engaging with communities, then we do also need the standard safeguarding policy of either yourself or the people that you're hiring in, and obviously public liability insurance. And for capital items, we do have a section at the bottom of the application which does ask you about how you think that buying that capital item is going to increase your community activity. But we'd be very happy to talk to you about that. If you're looking at what it is you want to buy and you're not quite sure how to measure that, then there are very simple ways of doing it, and we'd be very happy to advise. Next slide, please. In terms of milestones, we launched last Monday in the evening. So it's open now, and it will stay open until all of the funds are allocated, or we think we're running out of money. So there is no deadline, which is good. We won't be opening and closing. It is open now and until we need to close. We try to, and we have been successful in getting many applications appraised and completed from the time the application comes into our email to when the money actually goes into an organisation's bank, often within 6 to 8 weeks, and sometimes even shorter than that. But obviously it depends if there are complications, or if we're at the end of the programme, we're not quite sure if we've got money and that sort of thing. But yes, it's a quick process, and you do get an individual worker to work through it with you. Once you've had the money, so it's upfront payments, you don't have to do the work and then claim it back, you get the money up front. 6 months from when you've had the money, we will, or just before that, we'll be in touch with you to say, can we meet up, can we come out to visit you and have a coffee and a chat and talk to you about how it's gone. There are things that we need to collect, for our monitoring in terms of sort of evidence, copies of receipts and that sort of thing, and maybe if you've had an architect's plan done, we'll take a photo or that sort of thing. But actually we're also there to find out how it's been for you and what you're planning to do next, if you have an idea about which funding to go to, if there's anything else that we can support you in terms of advice and guidance moving forward. And then of course in big bold writing at the bottom, because we are obviously the same as all of these good growth shared prosperity funded programs, everything has to be completed, receipted and fully finished by the end of December 25, which will allow us up until April 31st to wrap it all up and collect all the evidence and completely wind it down. So it's a short timeline. But I think we will get lots of very good applications, and I can see from today that that's looking very likely. And those pictures there are St Mawes, Smith Community Space and Buddock Village Hall, who we have also funded. And I think that's it, apart from one more slide with some pictures, because I do like the pictures. Yeah, we've got St Austell Table Tennis Club there. We've got Nance Mill, who I think are on the call. Got Campbell and Red Roof Boxing Club and Morgan Smith. Is it Morgan Smith or Morgan Porth Surf Life Saving Club? And that is it from me. I will put some links in the chat, and we'll pick up further questions. So I think I'm going to hand over to Noel now.
Thank you, Vanessa. Brilliant. So I'll put my slides up. So my name is Noreen Bout. I'm the Community Levelling Up Programme Lead, and I'm going to give you a brief overview of Community Levelling Up Programme, or CLUP, Year 4. Please keep, I can see there's loads of questions coming in the chat. That's fantastic. Keep them coming. There's the 3 facilitators for Community Levelling Up are on the call, so they might be able to answer some of these questions during the meeting. So Community Levelling Up Programme, Year 4. The total funding pot that's available for community project for the next 12 months is 2.5 million. Most of this fund available is going to go towards capital expenses. So that's where most of the budget is at the moment, and we only have a very small amount of funding available for revenue expenses. So capital would usually cover things like refurbishment, extension, equipment, infrastructure, generally things that can be capitalized in an applicant organization's account. Revenue, we're going to be very, very limited in what we can support, but it would traditionally be things like salaries and contracts. But as you can see, because the amount we've got is very small, it will only be considered in exceptional circumstances when it's absolutely critical to the project delivery. Vanessa already went through the CAPS, the Community Area Partnership. Community Levelling Up, just like CCF, is very much based on geographical areas. So we're also working in 13 different areas. We've got the 12 CAPS in the mainland that you can see on the right map, and we're also covering the Isles of Scilly. In terms of the grant funding available, the minimum grant that you can apply for under Community Levelling Up is £25,000, and the maximum amount of grant is £200,000. This maximum amount of grant is subject to the budget available in each CAP. So each of the areas that you can see on the map have got a local allocation. Some of them have got a total budget that is less than £200,000. So if you're applying in one of these areas, you can obviously only apply to the maximum amount that is available in the CAP. I will show you in a minute a slide with the different minimum and maximum amount in each area. But as an overall programme, we will not be able to fund anything under 25,000 or over 200,000. We're expecting the average grant request to be around £80,000, and we are going to request 10% match funding with every single application for this round of funding. So 10% match funding has to be secured and in place at application stage, and application stage close on the 28th of February. So it has to be in place by then. We would expect the match funding to be cash match. So that can include things like money that's available in your reserve that you're happy to put towards the project. It could be a loan, or it could be another grant that you've secured towards the same objective. The only thing to be aware of for another grant is that SPF can't match SPF, so it has to be a grant from a different funder. Cash match means that we will not be able to accept any in-kind match, such as staff time or volunteering time, for example. Like CCF, we are also available, we have money available for cross-cap proposal. So if you've got a project that is going to deliver in most of Cornwall and or the Isles of Scilly, you can apply for a cross-cap project. There is money available for that type of project, so they don't have to be local in one area. For this year, we're going to have 3 funding priorities. The first one is sustainable and accessible infrastructure, and that could include things like community halls or village halls extension or refurbishment. It could include ramps, it could include accessible toilet, it could include hearing loops, green insulation, heat pump, etc., etc. The list is not exhaustive. The idea of this priority is to try and have greener and more inclusive community infrastructure in Cornwall. What we're going to keep an eye on and be very careful of for this strand of funding is additionality. So we're not going to be able to do any maintenance and repair. So every single investment will have to be directly leading to more services, better offer, more session, more workshops for the local community. The second priority for funding this year will be green spaces and well-being. And this could cover things, again, the list is not exhaustive, it's just to give you a flavour of what we could fund. Could be things like community orchards, playground, green gym, park, woodland path, that sort of green project. The last one is around funding and support for events and culture. And this could be things like a new farmers market in a village, a new local celebration in a town or in a village. There's going to be a few restrictions around that third priority. We will not be able to fund existing recurring events. So if you've got, I don't know, a festival every summer that's already happening and you need more funding for the next few years, we will not be able to cover that. And any new event will have to be able to demonstrate it will be sustainable. So what we won't be able to fund is a one-off event. It will have to have a very strong business plan to show how this is going to be sustained in the next few years. So in terms of eligibility criteria, I'll give you the basic one, but most of the information is available on the website if you want more detail. Just like CCF, the applicant have to be not-for-profit organisation. So we can work with charities, CIC, CIO, parish, town council. If your organisation is a little bit in a grey area, we will ask to have a look at your terms of reference or article of association to see how your profits are being used and what's the objective of the organisation. But if you are a private limited business with shareholders and that's where the profit goes, then community levelling up will not be the best fit for your project. Previous applicant, whether they were successful or unsuccessful, can reapply this year, and an organisation can put it multiple application. The fund last year was very competitive. We're expecting it to be very competitive again this year. So make sure that your requests are reasonable and in line with the smaller available budget that we've got in each area. We can't accept in-kind match. I've already covered that. No replacement or repairs. We're going to keep a very close eye on additionality and what the project is going to deliver for communities. Staff cost will be considered only in exceptional circumstances, and community levelling up will follow payment in arrears. So money has to be spent and then the grant is going to be paid back. If a project is scoring really high, has been prioritised and is eligible and has got a major issue with their cash flow, you can let us know. We will send you a cash flow, organisational cash flow, and see if we can justify an exceptional payment in advance. But the rule overall is that payment should be made in arrears. If you are thinking about putting an application in, I think the first step is probably to have a look at the prioritisation framework. So I put a couple of examples on the slide. There is one document per area, including the Isles of Scilly. And this document, it's only a few pages long, sets the priorities for each for funding in each of the areas. So you can start with having a look at these priorities and making sure that you tick as many of them as possible in your application. These documents are available on the website. I'm sure we'll put a link in the chat or send a link later. It's also available as a link when you go in the application form again, so you don't have to go back and find the website. So if your application is eligible, complete, and has been prioritised, it will be scored by Grant Management Services, who does the technical work on the proposal. And the three key criteria that they're going to look at when they're going to score the applications that have come in are, the first one is output and value for money. So this is how much are you asking for, what grant level are you asking for, and how many output are you going to deliver for these. So it's going to be for you to identify what is the best balance for your project. Your output are going to be part of your contract. So that's how we're going to identify how you're performing. And that's also going to be taken into account to know when we can release payment. So it's important that you keep them as realistic and achievable as possible, but also that you keep good value for money. The second criteria is going to be deliverability, and James was mentioning at the beginning how tight the timeline is for everybody to deliver for this final year of funding. So it's going to be a very important, and you can see that's the highest that's count for 40% of the score, because project will have to demonstrate that they can finish by the end of the year 25, December 25. The last one is going to be strategic fit and project need. So you'll have to demonstrate why there is a need for your project in your local area, and you'll have to explain how you fit in one of the 3 priorities that I presented on my first slide, how you fit in the prioritization framework, and how you fit in the good growth principle. So this is what is going to be looked at. So this is the slide that I mentioned earlier in the presentation. It shows what is the minimum grant amount, which everywhere is going to be £25,000, and what's the maximum amount of grant an organisation can apply for in each areas. You can see it differs, and that's because each local budget is different. It's based on the number of electoral division. So there's some large cap with a lot of people living in there and electoral divisions, and you've got smaller caps that are less populated, and therefore they've got less budget available. So someone that applies in North Cornwall, for example, can apply from £25,000 to £100,000. Someone who applies in Cap 12 at Camborne, for example, can go from £25,000 to £200,000. This is again available on the website, and we also put another link in the application form. So we try to simplify the process as much as possible for this final year. So there's only a 1-stage application. There's no expression of interest anymore, straight into full application. The application is currently live, so anyone can go in it and see what it looks like. There's strong gateway criteria. So there's a few gateway criteria at the beginning that has to be ticked, and evidence has to be uploaded for you to access the rest of the form. So my advice would be look at the question list before you go in, so that you can prepare all of your documentations. If your project is complete and if your project is eligible, in March, we're closing on the 28th of February. That's the latest date to put your application in, to submit it. Straight after, in March, the projects that are eligible will go to prioritization. So Vanessa explained that in each CAP there is a funding panel. This funding panel is a small group of local elected members. We're going to meet them for a couple of hours, present them in a batch all of the project in each area, and the funding panel will decide whether they want to recommend for approval or rejection. If it's an approval, they will then rank them in order of priorities. Once that's done, we will then bring the project to Cornwall Council for the final decision on the project. And then we will start contracting. So contracting will hopefully start in April, and the latest date for contracting will be June, which means that the project will have to show that they can deliver in a minimum of 6 months. Hopefully longer if we contract in April, but the minimum will be 6 months. All through that process, there will be facilitation from community levelling up team. There's 3 facilitators who are on the call. There's myself and a program administrator who can also help. We also work really closely with the grant management team who are doing all of the compliance, eligibility, financial and technical checks on the application once it's been prioritized. So all the way through that process, you'll have teams from CLUP or GMS that may request further clarification and further information on your project. So although you submit at the end of February, you should know in March, in April, whether you've been prioritized or not, and you should have a decision by June. You will have questions from various team member, potentially all the way through to clarify any challenge we may have on your application. With 2.5 million, we're hoping to submit to support approximately 32 projects overall, and we kept the output and outcome as simple as possible. There's only 5 of them this year. The first one is local event. So that could be a new program of event in a community hall, for example. It could be the launch or the opening of a new facility. It could be a new festival. It could be a new market. It's that sort of things that we're going to try and capture. The second output is green space, and these will be the park, the path that I was talking about earlier. The third one is new facilities and amenities. These will be the building works, the refurbishment, the extension. And then we're expecting all capital investment to include a green element to it. So this is what we're trying to capture in the fourth output, number of low or zero carbon energy infrastructure installed. That could be solar panel, it could be things like that that goes with the capital work. And the last one, we already had it this year, is improved engagement number. We are hoping that the investment in local community can bring new volunteers, can enable the organization that applied to recruit new board members or create new steering groups or community champions that will work in the community after the funding. I put a couple of examples of projects that we have funded last year, just for information. There's videos and there's case studies on the website that are available if you want to have a look at the sort of thing that we funded last year. So we launched last Wednesday. There's just under 4 weeks for people to apply. We're going to close on the 28th of February, which is a Friday at 5 o'clock. The prioritization meeting will happen in March, and the latest date for contracting will be end of June. All projects have to be finished by the end of December 25. So I think that's probably it for an overview of community levelling up, and we're just looking forward to receiving your project ideas in the next few weeks.
Thanks, Nolan. Appreciate that. So yeah, so I think kind of in summary, we've just to summarize kind of the two funds we've talked about. So Vanessa's covered the community capacity fund. So that's grants of between £1,000 up to £24,999. There's no match funding required. There is no deadline. It will close when the funds are fully allocated. So I guess that means it's on demand. So if you get your applications in earlier, there's probably more likelihood that there is funding still available than if you leave it. So please do bear that in mind. And you can apply via the website, and the link is there. Again, we'll circulate this webinar recording round, so you'll have all these links, and we'll also include them in the covering email as well. And then Nolan's just covered the community levelling up programme. So we've got grants from 25,000 to 200,000. You need 10% match funding requested, and that's cash. So that's cash match. It can't be in kind. It's got to be actual cash that you can evidence is available. The deadline for that is 5 p.m. 28th of February. And again, the website for applying is there. So that kind of covers most of it. If we just move on to the next slide, if that's okay, which is just any questions. So what I'll do, if that's all right, if Vanessa and Nolan could come back on camera, I'll just pick kind of some of the themes of the questions. There's quite a lot, so I guess kind of just to everyone that's asked kind of specific questions, if you've got specific project questions, please do make contact with either Community Capacity Fund colleagues or Community Levelling Up Programme colleagues, depending on where you think your project best fits, and they'll be able to advise, and they work closely together so they can signpost you between the two programmes. So please do follow up and have a discussion with the colleagues on the call. And the details on how to do that are all available and should be in the chat as well. I think what we'll do is if we just kind of pick up some of the themes, and I'll ask you both, Vanessa and Nolan, just to kind of give your kind of scheme specific responses. So some people, in terms of deliverability, there's been kind of themes around, do we have to own it? We're in the process of purchasing the building or the assets. Do we need planning? So these are kind of about deliverability of the project. I guess, Vanessa, do you want to just talk about those kind of things from your perspective?
Yes, so for our fund, obviously the much smaller fund, if you were applying for, say, a business plan and a feasibility study for a building a site or a site that you don't currently own, but you are moving towards owning it, that would be acceptable for us if we can evidence that journey is in place. So not too strict for us, but we can't just fund architect's plans for pieces of land that you have no link to at all. So that's us, I think.
Okay, thanks, Vanessa. And Nolan, do you want to explain for CLUP?
Yeah, for community leveling up, planning and owning or having a lease in place are all gateway criterias. So they need to be in place and available by the 28th of February, or the rest of the form will not unlock. So they're actually mandatory requirement at application stage. So we've got a stricter approach, and that's because we don't want to start eating in the delivery time.
Thanks. Yeah, so I think the key message there from Nolan is looking for kind of shovel-ready projects if you're coming to the community leveling up program. So you need something that can deliver in such short timescales, which obviously kind of been set by government. So hopefully you've got projects that fit within those kind of criteria. And then kind of another question there is kind of people have asked about staff costs. So Vanessa, can you just explain about staff costs or consultants' time, etc.? Maybe just give a kind of general answer in that area.
Yes, of course. So this fund can only fund external consultants or businesses, and so it can fund an individual consultant, a self-employed individual, or an organisation or a business. It can't fund internal staff or internal directors or trustees, which is one of the reasons that we need to talk to community interest companies ahead of time, really, because that can be quite difficult. So it is set up for community organisations to buy in support.
Thanks. And Nolan?
Yeah, for community leveling up, the staff cost can be contracts, but it can also be PAYE. And when we talk about exceptional circumstances, the case where it might be interesting or where we might be able to consider staff cost is if you've got a small contract, for example, to start a new event or a new festival, and you need to bring in that element of consultancy. So again, we're expecting it to be probably quite small. That could be something we could fund. If you're working on a large building and you need to bring in some project management, for example, for the capital element, this is something that we could also consider. And the third sort of scenario where it might be relevant for us is if you are a cross-cap project and you're revenue driven. In that case, we could consider some staff cost. However, what we're going to look at is how is that role going to be sustained in the future? So what we're going to try to avoid is to pay for someone's role for 6 months and then the role disappear and the impact disappears with it. So what is that investment going to bring in terms of output and how it's going to be sustained post funding?
Thanks, Nolan. And I think that's a broader kind of program principle that this year 4 funding that we've got from government is about transition funding. So what we are looking for is projects that do help community organisations, communities transition to kind of being self-sufficient, having a clear kind of exit strategy. So as Nolan's just said, do sell your project to us on how it's going to kind of carry on into the future without necessary kind of public support. So that's kind of one of the criteria to bear in mind as well. Right, I'm just looking at kind of time. I think we've probably covered most things. I know there's answers in the chat. What we'll do now is we'll take the chat away, look at the questions, and we'll do a Q&A document that will circulate alongside the email and the webinar recording. So you'll get all of that, and we'll send that to everyone that has registered. So I know some people have had difficulty actually getting onto the call, kind of technological issues, etc. So we will circulate that around to everyone that did register on Eventbrite. So hopefully people have this information, have contact details, and be able to have follow-up conversations with colleagues on the call. Is there anything final kind of words, Vanessa and Nolan, you want to add?
I don't think so. I think we'll put that Q&A on our web pages as well. We want to get as much information out there as possible, but we are also open for conversations. So yeah, do get in touch, and we will set up a Teams meeting or whatever suits to discuss specific projects.
Thanks. And Nolan?
Same thing for us, really. Have a look at the website. There's a lot of information. There's a lot of documentation about what the output, the evidence, the framework. So try to explore everything that's available on the website. And you also have the contact to the facilitator on the website, so you can get hold of them if there's anything that you need advice on.
Great, thank you very much. And thank you to everyone for joining us. And yeah, look forward to hearing from you. Thank you. Bye.